Okay. Okay. And as you can see, for semester 2, you have a new lecturer. I'm Diana Robertson. I'm the head of education at the IIE MSA campus. And just to give you some academic context or background, and I'll also pause for a second to meet all of you. So academic background, I've obtained a master's in education, and I've also obtained a master's in business administration. And I'm currently busy with my PhD at the University of Pretoria. I am a lecturer and a researcher. My focus is science education, computer integrated education, and many teaching and learning aspects. And I'll probably be collaborating with some of you, probably on research projects, or I might be your supervisor, depending on where I'm allocated. But I'm super excited for this opportunity to take you through the second half of this module, and I'm hoping to interact tonight for us to establish the way forward, and also just to get some context from you, where you are and how you're feeling about this particular module, so I can help you to the best of my ability. For the most part, just to give you some context in how I'd like to be contacted or how you can reach me, on the slide is my email address, and I will always put it on every announcement as well. And on all the slides and PowerPoint information that I share, you will see my email address on it. I prefer primarily to be contacted on email and during work hours and weekdays, Monday to Friday. And I understand that we've got a late Tuesday lecture, so I will communicate late on a Tuesday because of our allocated session. So it's dierobertson@ieemsa.co.za. For those of you who are not familiar with IIE MSA campus, it is a campus based in Reimsig, Johannesburg. It is the former Monash University campus that was taken, or the IIE has acquired it, and we have been launching the Faculty of Education there since 2023. Over and above the email address, every recording that we do, whether it is a session like this where I'm going to share insights, or whether I feel that some of the concepts or any activity that we didn't fully unpack, I will create a recording for it and upload it on the YouTube channel. And you are more than welcome to like and subscribe. But more importantly, you access the YouTube channel for all recordings, for clarity, just to revisit or to listen to something. If you've missed the session, this is where I will upload it, because sometimes the recordings are removed from the Learn platform. And so you will always have access to this particular YouTube channel for the semester. I do have other modules that are also lectures, so the codes will always start with the module code and the particular learning unit or topic that we are covering. So you'll easily navigate your way through the YouTube channel for access to content. And then lastly for this evening, before I revert back to the chat just to hear some of your voices, I've created a photo circle link for you. It's a QR code on the screen, and I'll also share it on an announcement. This is a tool that we use on campus and in our lectures for a number of reasons. It is a tool that generally we can use it to interact and just introduce each other, which is what I would ask of you to do today. But it's also a continuous collaborative tool. So let's say next year you collect your data and we want to start sharing on how are we progressing, what are we doing in the field, how is it going. It will be a live chat almost that we can offline where no one else has got access to it, only the team or the classroom or the students in this particular module, and we'll be able to share a bit more explicitly and intentionally what we're doing in our research projects. So it is going to be an introductory tool for this evening. I'm going to ask that you please scan the QR code, and that at some point when you've got time, upload a picture, introduce yourself, and we get started on the dialogue. And as mentioned, we're going to continually discuss and link up and share insights moving forward. Please note that I consider you colleagues. You might have a research topic that is in alignment with mine, and I will reach out for a possible article together. I could possibly reach out to you if you've got a cool topic that aligns with a conference that we are going to have in future, or you could be a guest speaker at one of our lectures. So this is not merely just a discussion for the sake of meeting this evening, but I think that our interactions are ongoing, as we are all lifelong learners, and that's why you are in this space, or that's why I think you're in this space, and you'll tell me a bit about it as we continue throughout the semester. But it would be a nice space for you to meet each other, but also to link up and collaboratively make the effort to meet your colleagues in the space. Some of you would be staff members at the IIE on the various campuses. Some of you are going to branch into higher education. These become colleagues that you're constantly going to be affiliated with or linked to. It would be nice to create a space like this. I'm not sure if you've done it in the first semester or in any of your other modules, but I would like to pursue it in this one. So I'm hoping that you will work with me on this particular app. And I'll go back to the chat to get your insight shortly. Or let me do it now and see what your views are. So I'm going to share a live chat link at the top of the screen. You can share, it's the Canva live login. I just want to test if it does work so that we can have conversation throughout the session as well. So if you scan it, you will be able to log into the live chat that will pop up on the right hand side of the screen. So just for clarity, the big QR code in the middle next to the photo circle logo, that's to introduce yourselves. The QR code at the top, it's for you to interact on this particular session on the live Canva chat. I'm going to ask that you scan that QR code at the top, or you can visit Canva Live and type in the QR code or the code that is given at the top. I'm going to pause for a second and ask you to interact and see if you are able to chat live on the Canva app with me. We're going to use the chat throughout the session as well, so it would be helpful if you can. Okay, so I've got one hello, thank you so much. And so I'm going to ask you a question and then you can respond on the chat. So basically regarding the photo circle application, for us to introduce ourselves and meet each other, you can give me some insight so I know if I'm a bit weird and you're thinking, what is she trying to do? Thumbs down, or are you understanding communities of practice and why it would be important for us to link up or meet up? And you could give me a thumbs up if you are in agreement with it and you're willing to give it a shot. As educators in this space and for you transitioning into lecturing, creating spaces where your students can collaborate becomes key, it becomes important. In the online space, it's even more important because we have a faceless contact that we're trying to navigate through, and making it meaningful means that we find innovative ways to do so. And so I'm hoping that you will participate on the chat, and I'll see if I can inspire you as we progress if you are a bit hesitant to join in. But ideally, it would be great for us to communicate moving forward. For the rest of us, I see 3 thumbs up on the chat. For the rest of us, we are going to use the chat throughout the discussion, so it would be meaningful if you do join in at some point. Okay, so those were the introductions. I'm going to dive into what I wanted to talk about or clarify this evening, and then you would have a good enough sense of who I am, and we can progress or plan how we're going to work moving forward. So the objectives that I had for this evening is just introductions and the way forward, clarity regarding ICE tasks, specifically clarity regarding ICE task 3, and then setting guidelines and instructions for the next session. So I have received the handover, but just wanted to touch base with all of you. And on the chat, you're going to tell me as well, what was the last learning unit according to you that was covered in semester 1? Where did you stop with your last lecture? On the chat, if you can recall, where did you guys stop more or less? What was the topic or the learning unit specifically from your understanding? So I can just make sure that I pick up fully where all of us are in agreement. I'm going to pause again and give you time to respond. what learning unit more or less can you recall? Did you stop or cover last? Does anybody have an idea? You're also more than welcome to unmute if you'd like to share. Or can't you remember? Okay, anybody have an idea? Where did you stop last? Okay, I'm going to go back to this. Let me stop sharing and get back to the Learn platform. Perhaps I am missing you, your interactions or your voices or some interaction just for me to know where I should pick up.
We are responding on the live chat.
We're in the live chat. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go back and share again. Okay, let's see. The feed is not picking up on my side. I'll hopefully get an update on it as we progress. Since the feed is a bit slow on my side, may you please unmute one more time and just tell me what was the learning unit, please?
Yeah, I think, ma'am, if you scroll up on that live
it's coming
chat.
from the, okay,
Coming from
it's
the
not down
top. There we
up
go.
yet. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so it's learning unit. It was based on task 3. Honestly, we're all over the place. We're not quite sure what's happening in this module. To be honest, I didn't attend the last 2. Okay. Okay. Okay, so what I will do is I'm going to take a step back from what I can see on the Learn platform. Task, just move to my next slide. So task 1 and 2, according to my understanding, is complete. And so what I've done is, because I'm going to be the one who marks task 3 and 4, I'm going to unpack those first and then set deadlines for them and ask you to do them in your own time. I'm going to upload the recordings that give you clarity exactly what to do in those particular tasks or what my expectation as the marker is. And you will then work on those 2 tasks in your own time while I progress through the content and try and clarify or catch up to where I think is important for you to prepare or complete task 3. If you've got not task 3, but the task 3 of your research as a whole. So just for clarity, I'm going to pick up from task 3 this evening, and then I'm going to do task 4 at the beginning of our next session. I will also give you clarity in an announcement where I will start my sessions from in terms of the content. I'll send you an announcement like I did this morning. I'll send it in advance so that you can prepare for the session. And I will then load task 3 and 4 in terms of the YouTube channel, as well as guidelines on what you need to do. I'm going to set deadlines ahead of time so you can self-task or work on those tasks on your own and just make sure that you submit them by the deadline. And while you are doing those in your own time, I will then work through the content gradually. I saw a comment said the topic was sampling. Thank you, that helps. I'm going to pick up from sampling is quite a broad topic, so I'm not too sure if she covered probability and non-probability or the different sampling methods, but I'll take that and I'll work from the sampling learning unit or chapter. I think it's learning unit 3 from what I've studied and prepared. And so for next week, I'll send you an announcement shortly after tonight's session and we will work on Learning Unit 3 as of next week in terms of sampling, just to pick up from where it was left off. And then you're also more than welcome in sessions like these, if there's anything that was covered in learning in semester 1 that is still unclear, that you're still stuck on, or that you're not 100% sure of what to do, you're also more than welcome to pop me an email or just on a chat like this and say, this particular topic I'm still unclear, and I can use that as a starting point for the next session. So we'll always go back, clarify something, and then start with the content or the topic that we are working towards for that particular session. We've got 15 sessions that were planned out for us in the timetable that you also have access to. And in those 15 sessions, you'll see the way I work. We'll start off with a bit of an online tool just to, as an icebreaker, we'll discuss something that we need to clarify, and then we'll unpack the content that is the topic for that particular session. I hope that will help, and I hope that my approach is not too weird or unconventional, but we are preparing lecturers and teaching, and you'll be in teaching and learning spaces, and doing so in innovative ways is where we are always required to. I know some of us are a bit hesitant for technology and too much gadgets and too much tools, so I'll tone it down a bit. I'll try my best not to drive you crazy. But the idea is for us to also learn new ways that you can incorporate tools in your own teaching spaces. Okay, so I'm going to move on because time can always escape me so quickly. So if I do rush a bit, or if I'm a bit too slow, you're more than welcome. I won't take any offense. As mentioned, we are colleagues, so you can say, Dai, please repeat too quick, I didn't hear you. Or yes, we get the point, you can move on. Because in some cases, I might feel that I need to re-emphasize something and you already got the point. And in some cases, I might feel that you've already, this is easy or something that is common sense, and I might brush over it and you need me to repeat or clarify. So please do speak to me, interact as much as you can. As I've mentioned, this is a faceless contact. I can't see, are you distracted by the pots and the pans and the phone and the kids, or are you really committing to or understanding where I am? So I need you to please engage with me throughout the session. We only have an hour. I won't take up much of your time, or I won't exceed that 1 hour at all. Okay, so I've made a note. Our next session will pick up from sampling, and sampling is Learning Unit 3. So I'm going to share an announcement that will say we're going to unpack X amount of topics within sampling. Please read through or look at this podcast or prepare for the session, and you will come to next week's session prepared, and we'll dive into sampling. For this evening, just to make sense of our contact and not waste your time, we're going to clarify aspects around ISTASK 3. Now the chat is live and it's open, so you're more than welcome at any point to give me your comments. And I'm going to try always to simplify the content for you. I won't necessarily read what's exactly in the textbook, and I won't necessarily read what's on the Learn platform. We are adults in this space and you are all able to read. So what we will do is we're going to have a dialogue, and I'll clarify it in a way that simplifies the content. Much of the research is always over articulated, and sometimes we get lost in what we're supposed to do. But if I also simplify it to a point where you feel that I should have used more academic terms because you're going to write in an academic way, you're also more than welcome to say that, and I will level up the way and how I articulate and navigate through the space. I'm just always mindful that not all of us are on the same level, and some of us are novice, some of us are just beginning, some of us, everything is French, and so I'm trying to create a space that we can all find common ground. But please chat with me. It's the first session and we're getting to know each other. As the semester progresses, I will surely know what you gravitate towards, and I'll package my lectures in a way that you can find meaningful. Okay, so ISTAS 3 is focused on ethics in research, and they've almost flipped what the approach of writing should be by asking it in a unique, upside down, backwards, reverse kind of way. So asking you around non-examples. But non-examples, in order to articulate or unpack it fully, we should also understand what an example is. And it's almost non-example versus examples type of clarity that you need. So the end of this discussion, the first 4 parts of task 4 is what we are going to look at. The first part says you have to write a non-example of ethical research practice in the context of your research project. So in that point alone, there are 3 elements that you need to know. Number 1, what is a non-example? Number 2, remind yourself of what ethical research practice is, and that you would have covered in semester 1, and what your research project is, and that you are constantly working on, and you are constantly unpacking that towards task 3. So these are the 3 key things that we need to look at this evening. Once you've done that, you're going to include why this is a non-example of ethical research practice. The third element asks that you should not exceed 250 words in your write-up. And please note, for all tasks where I'm concerned, you're going to have references and you're going to have a reference list. Because it says don't exceed 250 words, I won't necessarily count your references as part of the 250. It will be additional to give some of us who like to write and get our point across room to write. But I also won't expect you to write excessively if you've already made the point you wanted to make. So 250 words is the guideline for you to use. Note that you need to index reference and have a reference list. Then it asks for us to post your answer on the discussion forum called ICE-Task 3. So I'll create that discussion forum and I'll tell you when the deadline for that would be. So let's dive into what a non-example is. Now, generally, as an educator over the past decade, when I start teaching something, or I think for all of us, when we start writing an essay with a new term or concept, the first approach that we take is to define that concept so that you can make the reader understand what are you writing about. And you reference that definition as what is asked of us to do academically. But what non-examples ask us to do is to almost look at it in the opposite way, or think about how one-dimensional a definition generally is. Because when we start by defining something, we're giving it a single view, a conventional definition. And we don't look at the different angles that we could have taken to give our students broader or critical thinking opportunities. For example, the triangle on the screen. If I was going to teach about a triangle, I was going to give you this picture, and at the end of it, it was almost going to be a narrow example because you'd walk away thinking that a triangle has 3 equal sides. It's probably blue. The points will touch on each side, and you'll walk away with this particular picture of what a triangle is, for simplistic example this evening. But for the most part, what we have to do as educators is look at things from a different angle. And a non-example approach asks you almost to tip things upside down. So instead of looking at just that one example that I've depicted on the top right-hand corner, the initial blue triangle that I've given you, on the left-hand side of the screen, I give you 4 examples of different triangles. And now if I come with this perspective, I'm almost giving my students a broader way of looking at something and a different way of seeing it. And when they walk away from the classroom, they can identify triangles in real life in different formats or shapes. It could be leaning on its side, it could be smaller, it could be broader, it could be different colors. And if you take it one step further, the example that's number 4, there's something wrong with that particular triangle. And then it would ask you or ask of you to ask the question, can you identify what a triangle is and what it is not? And in point number 4 specifically, what has changed or what stayed the same? And if you do that, it starts opening up that critical thinking. It gives you an opportunity to start questioning things. And in classes for me or in lectures, it allows me to pause for a minute and ask my students to pause and reflect on what they see. And the culture then becomes where they start asking questions around number 4 can't possibly be a triangle because that particular point is not touching because of XYZ, and they'll start having a dialogue around it. So basically what non-examples ask of us to do is to think about what is this particular thing as you would have defined it in the traditional sense, but also what is it not, and almost approach it from a opposite, negative, or different perspective than you would generally have looked at it. So by concluding what a non-example is, I'm showing you an example at the bottom of the screen. Once you have given your students different examples of what a triangle is and what it is not, you can also now open up a whole fruit basket and give them more examples of different objects. And here they can start thinking about what other ways, or critically thinking from a different perspective or different lens. And in lectures, this takes a different discussion or a whole different approach. So in conclusion for this discussion, what is ethical research practice, if I had to ask you? This means you have to take a deep dive back into first semester. I'm going to ask on the chat just for you to give me a few words. What is ethical research practice? Or in your own study, what were you supposed to have considered to make sure that your study is ethical, that you are ethically taking the correct steps? What does it mean? What am I expecting you to do? So it's asking you to look at your study from different angles, not narrow it, you're correct. But let's let's home in and clarify it. So if you could give me a word that describes what is ethical practice, what would you say? It shouldn't victimize anyone. Yes, definitely. Can I have two more examples? What is ethical practice? In your proposal, you're going to write up or have mentioned how are you going to ethically consider your research study. What are two of those key things that you've done? I'll give some clues. Did you use the participants' real names? No or yes? If you don't have enough data, can you make up your data? So what does ethics require us to think about? In the general sense, ethics requires us to do the right thing. So what would the right thing in your research be? Avoid harm, be transparent, diverse perspectives, very much. There's objectives that guide you, yes. So in essence, you already know what ethical practice is. And if you have forgotten or maybe need to a refresher, your previous notes will always guide you on what that is. But for this particular essay or response, you're not going to start by defining ethical research in its simplicity as it is, but you're almost going to write what ethical research practice is not and what has changed. And it allows you to give a creative way and a new perspective without plagiarizing or paraphrasing or without putting yourself in harm's way by responding. To make sense of this, I have put an example together for you. So let's look at my particular example and you'll give me a sense if you're understanding what I wanted to clarify this evening. So a non-example of ethical research practice in my perspective is as follows. A researcher is conducting a study on the effectiveness of a new drug. After collecting the data, they find that the results are not statistically significant and do not support the hypothesis. To make the study appear successful, the researcher alters the data by removing certain outliers and selectively reporting only the favorable outcomes, thus presenting a misleading conclusion. So instead of saying what ethical research is, as you've listed on your responses, I'm writing an example opposite of what it is not. I'm giving an example of aspects that has changed and almost giving a negative or inverse example of what ethical research practice is not or should not be considered as. And in this, to make up the 250 words, you have to bring in support then to justify and say why this is a non-example, what then is ethical research practice, and then bring the message across. I hope this makes sense, and I'm going to go to the chat to ask you if you understand or not. And then you have to link it to your study. And perhaps if one of you are brave enough on the chat to think of your own research study and maybe ask me if your thoughts are on the right path, and we can look at and as a collective try and help you look at a non-example to unpack your particular study. While you're thinking about what I've said in the example that I've given you, for the sake of time, I'm just going to put up the rubric for us to debate more or less if you understand what you need to do. So a non-example formulation, I'm just looking at the extended abstract and the rationale columns where you need to score grade marks. I'm not going to look further down the rubric. So for extended abstract and rationale columns, rationale column says in terms of the non-example formulation, it should be logical and linked to the student's research design and topic. So you have to write this from your perspective and your topic. The explanation is clear and as it details exactly what the procedure the student would follow in an unethical practice, similar to the example that I've given you. And it illustrates more than one aspect of unethical research practice. So you'll see in my example, I gave you 2 or 3, but you have to give more examples to show you understand what ethical research practice actually is by giving the opposite of what it is actually. So one of your responses on the chat said transparency, diverse perspectives, and not put your participants in harm's way. So perhaps your example could show the opposite of how a researcher is not doing those key things, and then you can conclude by justifying it and saying why it should be correctly done. Once you've considered a non-example formulation in the rationale, the extended abstract asks that the non-example includes nuanced aspects of unethical research practice that indicates a sophisticated understanding of ethics. Now, I mentioned ethics is doing the right thing, and you've given me a few examples and noted them on the chat. You have to refer back to your notes about ethical responses and make sure that you show a depth of responses. If it's for 10 marks, I would say branch out a bit and give up to 7 non-examples so that you can almost write opposite and justify why those non-examples are unethical and should be ethical in the end. I'm going to pause for a moment and ask you the non-example formulation on the chat. Thumbs up or down, yes, no, you're a bit confused. I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask here. Please feel free to unmute or on the chat interact with me on this one. Okay, there's one understood clearly. I like that, appreciate it. Thank you for your response. Anybody else need me to clarify or I confused you a bit? I'm gonna wait for at least 2 more people and then I'll go on to the last bit and we can conclude. Anybody else? Are you good? Understood? So you basically flipped it. Essentially, we have the outline, what we should not do, what would make it not ethical. Yes. So you're flipping the script. It's almost like a flipped classroom approach where you ask your students, so what is it not? And then in general, in your own teaching and learning spaces, you'll see if you teach this way, you're almost able to show them or move them from misconceptions to what it actually is. It's a beautiful tool to use in the classroom, and it's an uncomfortable way for us as teachers because the natural way is to define something and unpack it. But this asks that you almost show them the wrong thing and bring them back to what is right. And ultimately, at the end, they'll have all these different perspectives and their own inputs make it quite interesting as a tool to use. And so they've used this example for task 3 for you to look at your own research from a non-example perspective and write it in that particular way. And then you can also draw from this and use it as a way in your own research study to write in the opposite direction or almost write inversely, still allowing us to see the golden thread in your writing, but it's a unique approach in writing that makes it different. Okay, we may proceed. I'm proceeding. The rationale then is the next one. I'm going to read only the last part for extended abstract. In addition, the rationale explains how the researcher can obtain quality data. So for this particular part, you've now in the non-example shown how or what it's not. In the rationale, you bring it back to what it is and how you obtain quality data and how without acting in an unethical manner. So now you bring back to the actual definition of what ethical practice is. I'm going to pause. The non-example, it's the opposite way. You flipped it. The rationale, you bring it back home. You bring it back to what it actually is. And then the final point is the creativity of it. So the non-example should show good creativity. So go out of your way to find a unique scenario to paint the picture, basically. Inspiring the reader to read on. It cleverly highlights the research ethics issues. So there's a creative writing aspect or element that should be embedded, in particular in the non-example formulation section. If you do that, this task should be simplistic enough to complete. And so rationale and creativity together on the chat, those two elements of the rubric, are you good? Does it make sense on what exactly you need to do? Just going to ask for one more round. Thumbs up, yes, no, clarity, in order for us to conclude. Okay, I'm going to take that and I'm going to move on. So just for clarity, it says on the discussion thread, and I'm going to ask you your advice here. The task asks further on that you vote for each other, you read through other people's work and you vote, and the best examples will be not rewarded but celebrated as such. Have you had previous tasks that was in the open forum where all of you had to interact previously? Have you had a similar um, interaction or activity or ICE task before where you interacted on the discussion forum? No, we haven't. Okay. So I will put an announcement to clearly guide you to where you need to go and upload this particular activity, and then also it gives you an opportunity to see others' insights to draw to give feedback on. Someone said, yes, in approaches of education, we did a wiki and blog post, okay? And on those particular tasks, you probably had options to see each other's work. And if you did not, this particular task asks that you reflect on each other's work. And then at the end, those examples, I'll bring it to the session and we'll celebrate and look at the unique ways that some of you are going to embark on completing this one. And then you'll see I'm going to put it in the calendar on the Learn platform, but I'm also going to send announcements, and I'm also going to ask that you remind yourself in where you keep your planner or your diary that on the 13th of August, midnight, this particular ICE task will close. So if you look at it, it's a month from now, and I'm hoping that that is more than enough time for you to complete ICE task 3 in your own time. Note that I'm concluding this ICE task, and if you give me the thumbs up tonight, I'm just loading the recording. I will not answer questions around this. I'll move on to ICE task 4. I'm going to, I think there was a hand up on the chat. You're more than welcome to speak now.
Hi there. So I have two questions I just wanted to
Mhm.
ask. With
Yes,
iStars 3, so
yes,
what it is and what it is not altogether, it should amount to
mhm,
250 words.
yes.
Okay. And then in terms of the second point and the third point, which is the rationale, um,
Mhm.
that's unethical and ethical basically.
Yes.
So I saw on our timetable that we will have an ethical meeting. So we just need to ensure that when we get to that point of our research, that it
Mhm.
is ethical.
Yes, your own research, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and what I also will do is I've got a few resources that I use just to summarize ethics. It's almost like a guideline or a checklist for myself. I'll upload that for you and you can look at, I'm not saying you have to take exactly what I'm saying, but to give you more or less just a guideline on what at PhD level or further than what you are maybe going to look at is a requirement, a broad spectrum, and you can choose from that which ones you want to draw from for your own study as well as for answering this particular task. Okay, thank you for that question. So it will be due on the 13th of August, and as I've mentioned earlier on, next week I'll start off with task 4 and then we'll dive into sampling. Task 4, I'm going to do exactly the same as what we did today, but without the introduction part of it. We're going to discuss what ICE Task 4 is. I'm going to upload that recording. I'm going to set a deadline for it. I've already planned the deadline, but I won't bombard you with too much things today. So the deadline for ICE Task 4 and the clarity will be next week. And then those 2 dates will be set and the activities will be live and you can go in and edit and work on it as much as you can. And by the deadline, I will start marking and give you feedback. So I hope that works for all of you. If not, please do pop me a message with that regard. I regularly, once a week, I won't bother you too much. There'll be an announcement once a week and there'll be an announcement the morning of the session just as a reminder for the link. But the YouTube channel and the links for where you will find the previous work, if you've missed anything, you always will have access to it. And I've given you my email should you need to inform me that you can't make it to a session or if you need my help additionally with something, you can always reach me. And that brings us to the end of our first live session. I'm going to stop sharing and go back to the Learn platform and then check in with all of you. Okay, so we're back on this side of the chat. I'm going to come back to this particular one, and I'm just going to ask you, based on task 3, how are you all feeling? Are you good? Are you okay? Are we on the right track? Is there anything you'd like me to consider? Okay, there's one consideration. Could you host the session a bit earlier, please? I've received the timetable for 7, but I'm sure if we can reach a consensus, I just don't know. Let me ask the group 2 questions. Number 1, more or less how many students are in this group? Do you know? Do you have an idea? How many are you more or less? Okay, I'm going to share my details in an announcement shortly and I'll upload the PowerPoint of my slides as well. It will have my details in again, but I'll put it on the chat, just my email as well. Do any of you know more or less how many are you, or is that a silly question to ask now? We're less than 20. Okay. Okay, 19, 20. Okay. So from the 19, let's work with that. 10 of you are online today. So even if I take consensus of moving the time, there might be 9 others that I'm going to inconvenience by shifting the time. But just for interest sake, so that I've got a sense and I can go back to the program or the head of the online center and say, we'd like to move it. What time would be more sensible or viable for the group as a collective? What times do you prefer, or what was the time for semester 1, more or less? 6:30. Okay. Okay, last question for this evening. Does 6:30 work for all of you? And I'm going to need a democracy and an all collective response here so that when I take this up and the change is made, that I'm accommodating all of you or majority of you, please. So if you can respond here, I would appreciate it. Okay. It seems like after 6 would work best for majority of you. I am going to ask that you, let me just make a note, 6:30. Okay, I'm going to reach out and see if I can make that change. I'm happy to accommodate you and what would work best for you. I will change my schedule and align with what works for the class. I think my responsibility or job is to serve you, so I'm going to do my best. 6:30 is doable. It's only 1 day a week, so I'll adjust on my side. And then I'm hoping that that allows more of your colleagues to be present. And research is a module that I'm passionate about. It changes every single perspective we take and approach we take, even just unpacking your own life choices. So it's important that it's at a time that you're going to focus and that you're going to meaningfully interact and that you're going to attend. So if 6:30 is what you prefer, 6:30 is what I will align with. And I cross my fingers that it will be for everyone's accommodation, or it will accommodate all of you, and that we can make the best of the 15 sessions that we have to get through. The module in itself is content heavy and complex at times, and so it needs to be conveniently packaged, or as much as I can create convenience for you. So thank you for asking, Noel, and I'll do that for you. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the session. I hope that I clarified task 3. I hope that you had a good interaction, or at least a good first session. And I'm praying that you will warm up throughout this cold few weeks that we've got left while you have to log in at night, families and all the distractions, that you'll find the time to fully commit to the journey and gain the insight you need to master task 3 of your research project. But I'm not going to delay. I can talk very long, so I'm going to stop myself.